There's been international condemnation of the self-styled referendums being held in parts of Ukraine on joining Russia. The G7, the group of 7 wealthiest nations, have called the votes a sham, as reports emerged of Russian forces intimidating people to vote. These are the 4 areas where voting is being held. They include occupied parts of Luhansk and Donetsk in the east, Zaporizhia and Kherson in the south, and cover around 15% of Ukraine's territory. Voting is expected to run until Tuesday, and the result seems almost certain to go in Moscow's favour. These pictures, filmed in Russian-occupied Donetsk, show representatives taking polling cards to people in their own homes. Here, at least, it's not a secret ballot. Meanwhile, Russia is continuing to mobilise its reserve troops. With the latest, here's our Russia editor, Steve Rosenberg.
It was the moment the Kremlin tried to show the people still back their president and what he's doing in Ukraine. Within days, Vladimir Putin is expected to annex a huge swathe of Ukrainian territory. There's international condemnation. But at home, the official picture is they trust Putin. Many of the people here, though, didn't trust us. When we asked the simple question, why have you come to this rally? There was a certain reluctance to answer. But they had something to say on the subject of mobilization. The call-up is worrying everyone with relatives of fighting age, Natalia says. Not Viera. I'd be much happier if my son got wounded fighting in Ukraine than die of alcoholism here, she says. Fighting is a proper man's job. This is not a spontaneous display of love for Vladimir Putin and his policies. It is a highly choreographed affair designed to give the impression that the whole country is behind the president. A lot of the people we've spoken to here today have been brought in specially from schools, from factories and other state organizations. In Ukraine today, in those areas occupied by Russian troops, self-styled referendums began on joining Russia. The West has denounced the votes as a sham, a smokescreen for annexation by Moscow. Back in Russia, more goodbyes, more men called up to fight in Ukraine. There's growing concern here that the scale of mobilization is far greater than the Kremlin had let on. Emotions are running high. Why have you taken our sons? A mother is heard asking this officer. When he tells the audience that his own son isn't eligible for the call-up, listen to the reaction. For the president, this could become a problem. Vladimir Putin once promised Russians stability. Now he's sending them to the front line. Persuading Russians to keep faith in him won't be easy. Steve Rosenberg, BBC News, Moscow.
And now we can talk to our correspondent in Kiev, Hugo Bashega. Hugo, what is the response in Kiev to these referendums?
Well, Tanya, the Ukrainians are saying that this is a farce. There's no legal basis for this so-called referendum. And I think the message has been a similar message that has been coming out from Western countries, that this is an illegal process that is being used by Moscow as perhaps a justification for the annexation of parts of Ukraine. I think we all know how this is going to go. I think there was a poll that was released by Russian state media yesterday saying that between 80 and 90% of voters in these occupied areas where this so-called referendum is being held are in favor of joining Russia. So I think it gives us a sense of what we can expect in terms of the official results of this so-called referendum. But we're hearing reports from those areas saying that soldiers are going door to door, forcing people to vote. People are saying that they're being threatened in those areas, and Ukrainian officials are saying that the population has been banned from leaving some towns and cities where this vote is taking place. But here in Ukraine, the officials are saying that this doesn't change anything and that they will continue with their counteroffensive to retake territory that's now under Russian occupation.
Yeah, so what do they expect to happen next, and whether these referendums could change the course of the conflict?
So obviously, I think the fear is that this is going to be used by Moscow as a reason to perhaps step up their military activity. They could say, well, look, these areas are now part of Russian territory, and we're going to defend them as if they are part of Russia. So I think this is the main fear. Even though authorities here are dismissing the vote, they say that things are not going to change. But I think we need to wait to see what Russia is going to do as a response to this vote. The vote started yesterday. It is being held in areas in 4 different regions of the country, and the so-called referendum is expected to be held until Tuesday. So then we're expecting to hear the official results after this vote then.
And this, of course, against a backdrop of further mobilization in Russia. Does Ukraine see that as a threat?
I think the response that I got from a top advisor to President Zelensky was that this was more a response from Russia to its defeats on the battlefield. There was a little bit of criticism, especially on state television in Russia, and here the view is that President Putin had to do something. I think the view here is that it is going to take a long time for these people to be trained, to receive military training and equipment, and we're talking about perhaps 90 days between the point of these people being recruited and the moment they arrive here in Ukraine. So they think that this is not something that is going to cause a lot of concern for now. But again, they're using it as another reason to request more military aid from Western partners. And they believe that this is Russia's response to the defeats on the battlefield.